Hello everyone, my name is Guerlain Ulysse. I am a consumer safety officer, drug specialist located here in the India office, and today I'll be discussing strategies for addressing FDA 43 inspection observations and warning letters. And this is just a disclaimer that the views and opinions expressed in this presentation are mine and does not entirely represent the official position of the US FDA for all matters.
So, the Food and Drug Administration is responsible for essentially protecting the public health by ensuring the safety, efficacy, and security of all human and veterinary drug products, biological products, and medical devices. We, as an organization, have been conducting international inspections since 1955, and we essentially use a risk based approach for selecting medical product facilities for inspection, and this includes selection based on facility type, the compliance history, any history of product recalls, and just any inherent risk of the product. And additional factors may include pre-approval submissions, if the firm has pre-approval submissions, if there is any history of surveillance inspections post-approval, if there's any emergency or outbreaks, as we've seen with the recent COVID-19 pandemic, or whether or not there's an MOU in place for international inspections worldwide. In this slide, I'll be discussing recent changes in the US FDA, and specifically October 1st, 2024, the US FDA implemented a reorganization for its field operations and other significant modernization efforts. This included restructuring of the FDA Office of Regulatory Affairs to enable our Division of Field Operations to focus on inspection, investigation, and imports as the core mission, and streamline and unify compliance processes to provide the most efficient public health outcome. Specifically, the FDA has changed the name of the Office of Regulatory Affairs to the Office of Inspections and Investigations, and this new office name will better convey the organization's role as the front line of the FDA. And essentially, the pharmaceutical inspections will now be aligned with the Office of Inspections and Investigations, and within that, the Office of Human and Animal Drug Inspectorate. There have been no significant changes to inspection activities. However, some of your previous ORA point of contacts may differ. And additionally, most of the compliance functions, resources, and personnel in OII/OHADI have been realigned to the center, specifically to CEDAR and CVM.
And if you would like additional information in regards to the recent changes to the US FDA and its field operations, you could just take a snapshot of this QR code on the slide, and it will redirect you to the FDA website for further information. I'll just wait a few seconds so in case anyone wants to take a picture or snapshot of the QR code. So what exactly does the FDA 43 represent for us at the agency? So the FDA 43 is a written statement of the investigator based on our review of the information provided, practices or conditions observed at the firm, documents that are presented to us and reviewed, any statements that are made, or absence of any of the above related to CGMP violations. The 43 is not a final decision or a regulatory action. As the firm, do have the opportunity to respond to the FDA 43 with voluntary correction, and then a decision is made with our compliance counterparts to determine whether or not the inspection decision is non-action indicated, voluntary action indicated, or official action indicated. So as you know, when we go out and conduct an inspection over a span of just a few days, we are truly only seeing just a snapshot of all the operations and or quality events that occurred throughout the past months, years, or even multiple years. And which is why drug product quality cannot just solely rely on our inspections or testing of finished drug products. It's imperative that quality is built into the product and processes, and that the processes itself are well controlled and designed. No amount of testing will ensure that the product meets its quality attributes. And a good example of this is in regards to microbial contamination. As you know, microbial contamination within a lot or batch is not uniform. So additional or repeat testing of additional samples due to a OS event dealing with microbial contamination is not justifiable. It is imperative that a firm would actually do its due diligence to conduct a comprehensive investigation to determine whether or not it's truly a laboratory error, or if it's an issue in regards to any production steps or any materials, etc. So here is a list of common FDA 43 observations that we typically cite as investigators. This includes citations for OS investigations or process deviations, potentially any questionable data integrity practices that we see at the facility, if there's any process performance control issues, testing into compliance, if there's any maintenance issues or increased number of complaints, rejects, recalls, if the design of the process itself is poor and or questionable, if there's a lack of reliability for the manufacturing equipment used, including if there's any frequent parameter changes, which brings into the question the process validation, and even ignoring data or evidence that does not fully support a conclusion with an investigation. So on this slide is additional deficiencies that have been previously cited by the FDA. This includes failure to follow appropriate written procedures designed to prevent microbial contamination of drug products perpetrating to be sterile. Some examples would include operators repeatedly displaying multiple poor aseptic practices during setup and filling operation. Another example would be inadequate media fills. If interventions are not appropriately simulated in media fills, that would be cited. Also, aseptic processing operations being inadequately designed to prevent contamination of sterile drug products. So, if there is any deficiencies in regards to monitoring and recording differential pressures in the aseptic processing facility, that will be cited as well. And a couple of related citations would be in regards to failure to include complete data during laboratory testing, and failure to establish and follow adequate written procedures for cleaning and maintenance of equipment. So on this slide, we just have a visual example of FDA 43 observations that have been previously cited as part of a drug inspection. To the left, we have ISO 5 grade A filling room for anesthetic jelly product. And here, if you could see closely, the operator was observed to be crouching over and using the filling line machine as a support to touch and wipe the bottom of the shoe foot, and then proceeded to touch the filling line machine equipment surfaces without any sanitation in between. So here we clearly observe poor aseptic behavior. And to the right is a non-sterile API facility, and this picture is a picture of equipment wash area that was used to clean out of place equipment, and essentially the room was observed to be covered in mold and mildew. The floors were cracked and the drain was covered with debris, and so this demonstrates the lack of cleanliness in the facility. So on the previous slides, we had examples of FDA 43 observations previously cited by the agency. So now we have the overarching question of how exactly should a firm go about responding to the 43? What should the firm submit and when? And what are the regulatory expectations? So when responding to the FDA 43 observation, this is your opportunity to explain your side of the story in terms of what exactly happened, especially if you're talking about any investigation in regards to deviations, a CAPA plan that has been initiated. Explain and paint the whole picture of what happened, how did this come about, when did it happen, if there's any timelines and justification for any date cutoffs, who was involved, was there an analyst involved, operator involved, managers involved, and how was such the incident determined and resolution determined? Why did it happen? This is a biggie. if there's any if it's regards to any deficient SOPs, any poor quality unit oversight, and how exactly will this be corrected? And again, how did it happen? Is there any gap analysis that you are able to put together in order to provide the full picture of why did this issue occurred? Some key points in regards to responding to the FDA 43 should include, as we already explained, just painting the picture of the extent of the problem, if there's any justification for looking or conducting a retrospective review of the issue or any other batches, if there's any other batches involved, if there's a campaign batch or if it's just an isolated event or batch, if there's a timeline or period that you're looking at in terms of any lines affected or any other products affected, uh, in terms of any risk assessment, looking at the criticality of how exactly this issue may affect the consumer at hand and the severity level and likelihood of reoccurrence, if there's any voluntary market action that's needed, and if there's not, why there's no action needed, especially in regards to stability studies and so forth for products that are already on the market. If there's any other mitigating factors, and you should also be including a comprehensive remediation plan in order to prevent reoccurrence of such issues. So technically, there is no legal requirement for a firm to respond to the FDA 43 observations cited. However, it is of the best interest for the firm to respond to the FDA 43 and/or warning letters, and most firms do respond to deficiencies listed. Uh, so if there's any request for an extension to submit the response, those are evaluated on a case-by-case basis. And so, for instance, if there's any laboratory testing that needs further confirmation of results, we just ask that you just provide us with an update of what exactly the plan is. If you're not able to submit your response on time, typically we ask that you respond within 15 business days, and this allows for our agencies to review the 43 response in a timely manner in order to assess the inspection simultaneously with your response and determine the final outcome of the inspection, whether it's no action indicated, official action indicated, or voluntary action indicated. And so the agency requests that the 43 responses are submitted in electronic format up to 100 megabytes. And essentially, this is also an opportunity to really just provide your CAPA reassessment plan and any additional findings that that you may share in terms of improvements that have been made since inspection. So on this slide, we have the list of emails for submitting the FDA 42 responses. These emails have been updated as of October 1st, 2024. For international human drug CGMP inspections, we have the email listed below. For PAI inspections, there is the CEDAR PAI program email. However, if it's a GMP and a PI inspection, you would be sending your response to both emails. Same goes for any drug animal inspection that would be sent to CVM directly. And within the response email, we just ask that you include the FEI number, which is the firm establishment identifier number, your firm name, and in the body of the email, please include your firm location, the dates of inspection, and the name of the FDA personnel who conducted the inspection. So on this slide, we have an excerpt from a recent warning letter and a statement which included a request for a comprehensive evaluation of the extent of inaccuracy of the reported data And as part of the comprehensive evaluation, please provide a detailed action plan to investigate the extent of deficient documentation practices. So, what exactly is our expectation when we say when we request a comprehensive evaluation? So, we would like to see a thorough and complete evaluation of any past occurrences, any list of records, reviews, and findings, ensuring that you're actually reviewing the drug product application data and findings, including the methodology, any details of the period covered, lot numbers, products, analytical test results, whether it's passing or failing, assessment of all systems that may be potentially affected, and a full transparency in terms of what actually occurred and root cause analysis or gap analysis of the incident. It's also important to consider that the 43 observations and even the warning letter points are not all inclusive. We expect that the firm should include all records collected by the investigators during the inspection as part of their response. And it's also recommended with the 43 response, and it's as well that verbal observations are also discussed, and the firm should also commit to responding to non-written deficiencies and or at least addressing the deficiencies observed throughout the inspection, whether or not is listed on a 43 and or warning letter. So as we touched upon earlier, here are some deficiencies commonly found in FDA 43 and warning letter responses. This includes the lack of timeliness with future plans, including timeline for, say, completing a validation plans while operations remain ongoing. Like, what exactly is your plan to continue operations while the firm is addressing commitments made for the 43 response and warning letters? Is there any timeline expectations for laboratory testing and scheduling and expectations for receiving the results? Please include that. Any failure to address the what, when, why, how, and who regarding the findings usually indicates incomplete or limited information in the FDA 43 and warning letter response. Also, it's important that you as the firm, you include all supporting data, whether it's the protocol, report, any good and bad results, and any explanation in regards to the lack of data that cannot be provided at a certain point, whether or not that will be provided during the initial response or during a follow-up response during periodic updates. We also see that there's failure to address unmet commitments from previous inspections and how new commitments will prevent reoccurrence. This also includes a lack of retrospective review, whether or not the issue or review of the issue is extended to other lots, other products, other lines, and especially if it's a repeated issue at the site, how is the firm looking at it from a global perspective? If there's any facilities within within your network that may have the same issue, are you doing a global review and implementing global corrective action plans to ensure that the same issues are not repeated at the other site that may have similar products or similar lines? And again, here we have a list of common deficiencies found in FDA 43 and warning letter responses. I would just like to reiterate that it is important to not only include a CAPA plan, but provide evidence and details in terms of how you as a firm plan on implementing the CAPA and whether or not that needs to extend to other facilities within the network and in order to address a global correction plan. Sometimes we also see that the firm forget to address important parts or comments made in awarding letters and only submit high-level reviews and general overviews. As a firm, once you actually receive the FDA 43 and warning letter, it's imperative, I would suggest, to read through the warning letter, then take a step back and actually assess the warning letter as a team with whether or not you have external, internal expertise coming together and assessing the different parts of the comments made in order to ensure that each section is addressed thoroughly and that each department is involved for providing input and expertise into the issue. So, with determining whether or not regulatory action is warranted from a 43 response, the first thing is that we always bring it back to the patient. So we always have to consider the associated risk of having the substandard product or deficiencies as it relates to the patients and clinical significance. And with this, we're looking at if there's any impact or violations of the CGMP violations and deviations on product quality attributes, whether or not it's a data integrity issue or it's a issue regards to basic GMPs, the severity and likelihood of harm again to the affected product in the market and patients that are consuming the product, any assessment of the extent of the problem, how was the assessment made, and whether or not the firm management is actually involved in the and aware of the DI or any critical violations and how that's being handled. So when reviewing the firm's FDA 42 response, we're essentially taking a holistic approach in examining the facility's state of control. So in regards to the deficiencies that are cited, is this the pattern or is there single instances of such issues occurring? We also are reviewing the batches that are released or used to support pending and approved applications. And if this was an inadvertent error or minor error, how does that have any impact on product quality? And who exactly was involved in the DI issues or CGMP violations? So when completing a remediation plan, it is important for the firm to just take a step back and assess whether or not the team has the appropriate GMP knowledge to actually tackle the issue at hand. Is there a thorough review of expertise within the team in order to understand good versus best practices? Otherwise, the capital will be ineffective. So it's important to assemble a team that can properly identify the issue and involve all applicable departments, whether or not that looks like input from the microbiology department, the QC chemistry department, engineering department, etc. So here's just a list of recommendations that should be included in the remediation plan. Such recommendations include providing details of the methodology. It is also important to note that testing and retesting does not correct the GMP problem. This can be used as part of the risk assessment strategy, but does not conclude the firm is in compliance and is not subject to regulatory action. Additional recommendations include interviewing current and former employees that were involved in the issue. If there's any SOPs that are being revised as part of the CAPA plan, how will you demonstrate the effectiveness? If there's any trainings or retrainings being provided, please provide details in regards to the effectiveness metrics and any follow-up sessions. So it's always important to bring it back to the patients, and what we're looking for is analysis of risk to the patients and if there's any risk posed by the ongoing operations. If there's any individuals involved in the data integrity issues, and if they're still on site, are they able to influence current GMP data or drug application data? If there's any interim or long-term measures, and if there's any updates that needs to be made to reports, those should also be included as part of the remediation plan. So when conducting a comprehensive evaluation as part of the remediation plan, it is imperative that the firm take steps to examine organizational structures and personnel responsibility. This includes assessing management involvement in the situation, if the SOPs and any contractual agreements are there up to date and current. Another point to consider is actually looking at the real source of the issue. Oftentimes, the temptation is to blame one employee or a small group of employees. However, finding people who are not responsible for creating the problem is not the solution, it is imperative that the firm actually takes a step to complete a gap analysis of the issue. And my last point is that hiring third-party consultants is not a legal requirement, but is recommended. However, you must ensure that the consultant actually have understanding of regulatory agency expectations, are qualified, and impartial. And here are just a few points to focus on when completing the remediation plan. This includes detailed description of strategies and procedures, and this would include prioritizing the time period involved and assessing whether or not there are any batches or products in the market, any risk mitigation that needs to be done, assessment of pending applications and approved applications. And for the second point, in terms of identifying people and systems involved in any data integrity breach, it is important to look at other related systems that could have the same issue, whether or not that's looking at other raw materials and components and ingredients used, testing records, production and processing records, and similar equipments. And in terms of conducting a risk assessment, it is also important to determine the effect of the deficient documentation practices on the quality of the drug product released for distribution. If there were OS drug products shipped, what is the impact to patients? And if there were no OS drug products shipped, it is important to maintain appropriate preventative controls. So as an agency, we're well aware that some firms have introduced sophisticated technology and algorithmic approaches for conducting their forensic analysis. These approaches can be useful. However, they should not be used as an absolute substitute for the manual review of data systems. For example, most problems that occur by manually manipulating data, changing practices in a laboratory, or manufacturing is often caused by altering design configurations. Therefore, the extent of the problems cannot be expected to be determined by just mere imaging or electronic searches. So in terms of management strategy, this slide includes a list of key elements that should be included in a capital remediation plan. You as a firm want to take the time to reconstruct the manufacturing process and events through records and existing information. You also want to be certain that there is no falsified or omission of data, any hiding of data, or a substitution of data. It is also important to note that data integrity problems are not always intentional. Sometimes they result from poorly controlled systems. So there needs to be clear accountability for data integrity in the future. This also includes potentially implementing an enhanced ethics program or conducting additional trainings. So I'd like to stress that it's ultimately management responsibilities to establish a vigilant quality culture, which includes timely action implemented to prevent risk to quality, that there's life cycle adaptations to address manufacturing weaknesses and continual improvement in systems, that there's effective product quality monitoring systems in order to detect any emerging quality issues and provide early warnings, and that there's systematic solutions implemented rather than ineffective shortcuts, and that problems are continually fixed rather than putting it off and ultimately leading to costly and more complex issues. So once you have addressed all issues identified by the FDA, whether that's through the FDA 43 or warning letter, the next step is to get ready for reinspection. And with this, we ask that you only request a reinspection when you know you are ready and have corrected all previous deficiencies and commitments made to the agency. This is why it's also helpful to include a timeline of events and expectations as part of your corrective action plan so we could further assess when it's best to re-enter your facility and conduct a reinspection. Also be mindful that we're looking specifically at corrective action, and any failure to deliver on any of the promised corrective action may cause your firm to remain in OAI status, prevent us from lifting an FDA import alert, and also create uncertainty in regards to future product applications. And the last thing I would like to add is if your firm is making a decision to shut down a manufacturing facility, we ask that you please contact the US FDA drug shortage team at the email below so we could further discuss ways to address the issues while still maintaining supply of medically necessary drugs. Drug shortages are a significant public health threat, so we encourage manufacturers to prioritize high quality manufacturing and ensure supply and capacity. Thank you for this opportunity to speak today. I'm available for any questions following this presentation.